Welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. This podcast covers topics that expand human consciousness and performance. On the Make Sense podcast, we acknowledge that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works, and that perception is a subjective and acquired taste. When you change the way that you look at things, the things that you look at begin to change. The Make Sense podcast is sponsored and primarily funded by the Make Sense Academy, our private community where open and curious seekers of growth and expansion apply the Make Sense principles and systems to move from simply going through life to growing through life. So check out the Make Sense Academy risk-free for less than you'll spend today on shit that you don't need. Welcome, my friends, to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. Welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast.
Makes sense.
Sometimes life writes love stories so unexpected you couldn't make them up if you tried. Today's guests, Jennie and Bryan Drollinger, know precisely what it means to become lost and then, against all odds, be found. Years ago, Bryan and Jennie were young, in love, and full of possibility. But like so many other couples, life had other plans. At a time where dating was limited to in-person communication and catching somebody at the right time on a landline, a few simple misses turned into misunderstandings. Bryan followed his path as a devout Mormon, got married, raised a family of 7, and built a successful career. Simultaneously, Jennie married and settled into a marriage that blessed her with 2 beautiful children, yet there was an absence of that loving feeling she once dreamed of. Life brought challenges for both of them, including failed expectations and the deep struggle of trying to hold it all together, especially when marriage is intertwined with faith, community, and awareness that their lives were being spent more on the worse side of for better or worse. Then came the unthinkable. Bryan's marriage ended, leaving him in one of the darkest and most challenging spaces of his life, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Simultaneously, as fate would have it, Jennie's marriage was ending as well, facing her own heartbreaks and growing pains. And then the universe intervened. A random reconnection occurred when Bryan, needing an attorney, found himself seeking a consultation with the firm's paralegal. Her name? Jennie. Sparks flared, and a realization that both of their winding, messy, painful roads had prepared them for this, a second chance on love, the one that they both once shared. Now, through their new podcast, A Second Chance on Love, as well as their upcoming book that's been made for a movie, Bryan and Jennie Drollinger are opening up about their journey, their lessons, and their hope for anyone out there who's wondering if it's too late to rewrite their love story. Please welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, Bryan and Jennie Drollinger. This is a unique episode for many reasons. I mean, these are actual personal friends of mine. We have a lot of history together, and they have this beautiful story, maybe even as beautiful as our story. We're not sure yet. What's interesting about it is typically we go into like these philosophical like wormholes into, deep thought and making sense of things. But this one is one that I think hits home with a lot of people. And that is this idea of making sense of a second chance on love. I think love is such an important thing. So I want to welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, Bryan and Jennie Drollinger. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having us on.
What I'd love to do, I'd love to deep dive into this. And I'm so fascinated with this idea. There's elements of faith and hope. And there's so many people out there that maybe like myself at one time in my life have just given up. And so many people have just said like, this is all there is. And once again, accepted their situation. So what I'd love to do, and Bryan is somebody that I consider family. I've known Bryan and we've worked together for so long, and he's got an amazing story. And I know a lot of Bryan's story. Bryan, I don't know if we want to do ladies first, but what I would love to do is just get a little bit of a background. Maybe we can give the short story. We're going to go back to when you guys tell me about your childhood when you knew each other, but just tell me a little bit about both of your relationship experience before the second chance.
It started actually 40 years ago in 1985. And my best friend was dating her best friend. We were at rival high schools up in Alaska. And she actually came up to Alaska, it was a year before.
Yeah.
And she'd been in Utah the whole time in her life, but she came to Alaska. She's only there for a few years. I kind of jokingly say that's why you came up to Alaska was to meet me. We were introduced at a dance.
High school
In
dance.
85, a high school dance. And
we hung up for a couple of years. And that's the thing that I think was the glue for all four of us, because we belong to the same religion, the same faith. And so even though we went to rival high schools and lived an hour apart, we kept in touch through the activities, through the church.
You guys met at a dance?
High school dance.
High school dance.
High school.
Yeah.
How do high schools that are an hour from one another, first of all, I could get the rivalry thing, but like, how do you guys have a dance together?
It was the 80s. Everybody danced. It was like there was
I know dancing. I used to break
night. And what was actually going on, JC's back a little further, is I was the new girl in town. And so I was 15 years old and I was dating a 21-year-old guy. And he was from Germany, had an accent, and he wore makeup. He looked like Nick Rose from Duran Duran.
I would have dated him.
So my best friend, Debbie, who I was sharing a locker with at the time, she said, so my boyfriend has a really cute friend and he has a nice car and he's coming to the dance on Friday, and Bryan is more our age. She said that just like, he's more our age. So what if we invite him and you can meet him? She's like, I think you'd like him. And so that's how we met. And then I was in the process of dumping Mike to pursue Bryan, but Bryan didn't understand what was going on. And so he got upset with me because he saw me with Mike at homecoming, and Bryan invited himself to homecoming. And I was trying to get rid of Mike so I could be with Bryan, and Bryan got mad and drove away and left. And there we go.
This is so Bryan. I can understand
this. This is a lot of
So just give me, because we're flashing past this like almost thing that happened. So what happened in your eyes at that moment, Bryan? What's your side of the story?
There was a lot of different things going on. We actually were dating. Our best friends were boyfriend girlfriend. We were not. Not yet. So we were like, I was always driving in the car. They were always making out in the back. And we would get to know each other, but there was all these high school games kind of going on. Like she would dance with other boys and I would get jealous, and
he would say, don't go dance with those boys. But then they came and asked me, and I'm like, well, this was at a church dance that this happened. And so he's like, don't go over there. Don't go dance with those guys. Well, my dad was like the leader of the church, the bishop. And I'm like, I have to go be nice to them. And they go to my high school and I have to see them in the hallways. And anyway, I was just trying to be nice, but he didn't like that. And he drove away and left me at the dance again.
Here's something interesting. We're going to jump around a little bit. When we look at this idea of a second chance on love, what you guys are bringing to the surface right now, timing is a big part of it. It's like you guys maybe look at each other back then and say, we weren't ready for each other on either sides. We got one.
That's true.
She's dating a guy from Duran Duran, and Bryan is like super jealous, So it's interesting how the universe works, but the universe gave you guys signs to say that it wasn't necessarily not right, because the feelings were there, right?
Timing.
But it was timing, right? But did you guys ever date at all or no?
Well, yeah, but this is the sad part. I'm sorry, I'm going to interject. We were sitting alone in Bryan's car, and he handed me his class ring, and he was like, "Here." And that's how you used to ask someone to go steady and be your girlfriend. And I wasn't understanding what he was doing, and he was like, "I never wear this," and he handed it to me, and I'm like, "Okay." And then I gave it back to him. Call me blonde, I don't know, but I was like, And then I'm like, is he trying to ask me to go steady? But in his shyness, he was very shy and quiet in high school. So shy. Yeah. So we'd go to high school games. Jerry, his best friend, was like the quarterback and score. Yeah. In football. And we'd all be, yay, and Bryan's all sitting down here like this. And we're like, come on, stand up with us, cheer him on. And he was just all quiet. There were a lot of misunderstandings and overthinking. And for example, the one time at the dance where I went and danced with Shane O'Neill and he got mad and left, I called Bryan the next day and I said, Bryan, will you please come to the next dance? I need to talk to you face to face. I don't want to have any misunderstandings. I like you and we just need to chat. And back then it was long distance to call. And so my mom gave me 15 minutes to talk to him. So I had 15 minutes and in 15 minutes, I couldn't tell him how I felt. So I dumped the other guys. I was ready to go forward with him. So the next dance comes that Saturday night and I'm waiting for him and I'm so excited. And he walks in with a date and he looks, scans the whole gym and is like, and he sees me and he gets this big smile. Like, I came to the dance in your face. So there we are.
There was back and forth
all the time.
Quite a bit, actually.
Until 1987.
And then I left. I graduated from high school. She was a year younger. So I graduated high school and I moved down to California. I went on a mission for my church. And
which
I was
is
there
so
for,
cute.
I was there for 2 years and Jennie was writing me back and forth.
He wrote letters.
She moved back down to Utah. I was going to school and working and stuff. And we used to we would do talk tapes, like cassette tapes
back and
forth
through the mail.
And then I would also, since I write music, I would also write songs. And then I would.
Can I just hold you for a second, just in case? So a cassette tape is a rectangular piece of plastic that used to have these.
Do we have one?
Kind of like an old movie theater with like tape on it, but it played music. Okay, go ahead.
You're making me feel really old, JC. So we do that, and we actually have a lot of the letters still. We have, I think we've counted like 30 or 40 letters. We went back and forth to each other. So we really liked each other. But I was on my mission, and when I got home.
Oh, and you know what? Let me interject this too, really quick, because we found one of the letters that I wrote to him. It was so sad because there was someone that was pursuing me. I was uncomfortable, and I wrote Bryan a letter telling him about it. I was like, "What should I do? Should I tell him?" And then my friend Debbie, my best friend, says, he'll find out through someone else if you don't tell him through the mail, and then he's going to think you're playing games again with these other guys. So you just be straightforward with him. Be honest, tell him. So I was brutally honest. I don't know how to tell you this, but this guy wants to marry me and I don't think I'm ready. I'm too young. I just graduated, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, please help me, Bryan. What do I do? Unfortunately, he's on a mission and he can't expose his feelings because he's thinking about Jesus.
Right. Right. So Jesus has played a role in messing this up a little bit. Okay.
He just sent me a letter back, like, pray about it. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's okay. All right.
But either way, what I think is cool and cute is that, like, there were so many reasons for you guys on both ends. You guys couldn't shut it down. You liked each other either way. There was a little bit of jealousy and stuff like that. So I'm just foreshadowing how later on in life, with this whole idea of the second chance, I would assume that you guys went on in life not forgetting about each other.
Well, the whole thing happened in 1989 when he got off his mission. His parents relocated to Oregon. So he called me the night he got home. I was in college in Salt Lake City. He called me that night and he told me he was home. Like, this is so weird. I don't know anybody. I'm coming to Salt Lake and I really want to see you. And so I'm like, I want to see you too. A week and a half later, this was December, because I was just getting done with finals. He called me from a family member's home that lived in the valley there in Salt Lake somewhere. He doesn't remember them, but he said, I'm at a family's house. I carpooled. I don't have a car yet. I'm with other young adults that are picking up other students to come home from Christmas break from BYU. I was like, oh, he's like, I'll call you in the morning to tell you what time and where to meet me, because he was shopping songs. He was going to a recording studio and he told me kind of the area that it was in. And I was like, oh, okay. I work downtown at the mall and it's right there on Salt Lake. So yeah, I can meet you. That'd be great. And so the next morning, I didn't hear from him. I'm like, and the phone was
disconnected.
Long story short, my roommate, there were 6 of us girls back in those days. One person had to have the utilities in her name and she didn't pay the phone bill. We were roomies since September. This was December. We were always writing a check to her in her name. I don't want to say her name. Instead of US West Communications, it was to her personal check. And our phone bill was always like, my phone bill every month was $300 because I was calling my parents in Alaska. Long distance was expensive back then. So if you waited till after 8 p.m., the rates would go down. And my mom would be like, call me later. But anyway, my parents would send me the money for the phone bill. And I would just write that check for $300 to Lisa every month. plus 4 of us other roommates. So it all started making sense when the phone was dead and it was disconnected. And back then in those days, when the phone was disconnected, you meant to make the call to that number. It would say, this number is disconnected. No further information is available. So if Bryan was trying to call me to tell me where to meet, I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to think I did this on purpose. That's not how I used to block people, because our phone numbers weren't connected to all these apps and services and things that we do nowadays. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go find him. So I remember running down South Temple. I went past the Cathedral of the Madeleine. It was this beautiful Catholic church, and the bell was tolling noon, and it started raining, and I was running, and I'm like praying, oh gosh, I've got to find him, because he's going to think that I'm playing games again. And so I go down there to the area I thought he was at, and I never found him. And I looked for him for like 2 hours. And then I had to get to work. And then even then, when I got to work, I went through the white pages of the phone book, the old fashioned phone book, to look for any Drollingers in Salt Lake Valley. And there were none. And I'm like, was he even here? So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, surely he has my address. So maybe he'll write me a letter and be like, what happened? Because the next day I flew to Alaska for Christmas, and I couldn't wait to get back. It was like all kinds of angst trying to get back to Salt Lake in January to see if there was a letter from him. However, the volcano erupted in Alaska, and I was detained because they shut the airport down, and I couldn't get back to Salt Lake till like mid-January. And when I got there was no mail from him. So I'm like, that was it. We were done.
Bye-bye.
We drove off and married other people and had separate lives for 32 years. And then...
So I'll finish this.
As you can see, Bryan is the one that talks the most in this relationship.
This is a flip, man.
So what's interesting is, we led separate lives, had families. I had 7 kids and she had 2. And we, the relationships, though, it was interesting because later on we found out that we really are leading kind of parallel lives.
Yeah.
With our relationship, which is very interesting. We didn't find that out till after we met again. But what happened is I was going through a divorce, and my best friend, who's now married to her best friend, that they were boyfriend, girlfriend in high school. They've been married for like 10 years. So they kind of have a backstory too. But they basically told me, and my best friend said, you need to call Jennie. So I was in Idaho at that time, and we had no communication for 32 years.
He was dead.
I was dead to her. Yes. I had driven off a cliff and died. Yeah. Anyway. So my best friend says, you need to call Jennie. And I'm like, why would I call Jennie? I'm not even divorced yet. That's what he goes, because she's a paralegal in Idaho. And I'm like, really?
Oh my God.
And she lived about 3.5 hours away from me. So I called her. She reluctantly picked up the phone. Her friend was on the other, said, it was kind of like funny because I was talking to Jerry and she was talking to Debbie. And anyway, that's our friends that are married now. And she was like, can Bryan call you? And Jennie didn't know what to do.
Like, what? What the hell? Where were you in 1989? Now you're calling me for help?
So hold on a second. We just jumped into the future there. So, but there's 2 sides of the story. Bryan doesn't know how hard you tried back then. So Bryan, did you create this idea that she had just blown you off or something like that, right? And for those that know Bryan, that doesn't typically go well. But what's so fascinating about 2 people that have a connection and then separate and then come back together is to acknowledge how many things could prevent it from happening. So first of all, you think about those times. I was just thinking about like all the movies from those times. I'm 54. I didn't have internet in high school and college, right? So I just remember, which meant no cell phones. I just remember every movie ended the same. It was like, there was a misunderstanding. Somebody was getting on a plane and people had to like run or drive to the friggin' airport to stop them and let them know. So it was like one of those stories, but she couldn't find you because she was at a disadvantage. She couldn't text you and stuff. What I'd love to get into is one concept that I think is really fascinating that I want to know is you have this thing, even though it didn't work out, you guys experienced chemistry and just like, wow, did you go to the next phase of your life when you got married? And I don't want the people you were married to down. That's not my intention. But did you kind of have to settle for a new version of what you thought love was?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, like, because I
1000%.
I know that feeling. I know that feeling. Tell me, because you're both of the Mormon faith. I'm not Mormon, but I love it just because so many people I know are of that faith. That's how I knew Bryan. Funny story about like one of the first times Bryan and I became friends is I was speaking on a stage, and I kind of had a tendency of saying bad words and things like that on stage. And I didn't know anything about religion at the time because I didn't really grow up with one. And I said something from stage. I said, one of my favorite quotes is I said, if you continue to lick the lollipop of mediocrity, you'll suck forever. And the guy that owns the company, a mutual friend of ours, comes up and he goes, hey, JC, you can't say that from stage. I go, why? He goes, because there's like Mormon people in the crowd. And then right as he said that, this guy comes up, Bryan Drollinger, and he goes, hey, with a pen and paper, he goes, what was that you said? And I'm like, you mean like that guy? So that was when I said, I like Bryan Drollinger. But tell me a little bit about that, guys, because this is a big issue. There's a lot of people out there. By no means do I want this episode and this concept. And I know that when you have your podcast, this is an important disclaimer. The goal is not to tell people that they're not happy and that they could be happier. That's not what this is about. This is about like following the universe and the signs and what's right and things like that. So what was that like, in short, because we don't want to talk about other people, but what was that like from a religious component, but also just this moving into this new reality that, hey, this is the best it gets? Like, what was that like for both of you guys, that period of time?
I was a very committed guy. Like when I decide to do something, I'm very committed to what I'm doing. And so that, I think that might be the reason I was in a relationship so long, being committed. But
I think there's like an expectation that you go to college, you get married, and you have kids. And like I was discussing this particular individual that I wrote Bryan a letter about, this guy that was pursuing me. He was like stalking me. And finally, I ended up marrying him. And that's who I had my children with. And I was talking to my grandma about it one day, and she said, and she gave me some false doctrine. I was just this young, girl trying to be obedient and do what they, expectation. And I'm the oldest of 8 children. And he's the oldest of 7 children. So we both had a lot of, our parents' peer pressure, like your siblings look up to you and you need to, set a good example for them. Like, oh, but my grandma, she told me, she's like, Jennie, you can learn to love anyone. You just have to sacrifice. And I went on that advice for 13 years. And it didn't work out so well. I have 2 beautiful children. He has 7 beautiful children. I would have never had 7 children. So apparently that's the reason maybe why we didn't connect, because those 7 needed to come to him. And I just had my 2, and now we have the 9 together, and we just, So there.
But the other disclaimer, I put a disclaimer out here. When I called her, when I told her I had 7 children and the situation and everything.
That's not typical. Like, hey, before we date,
here we go.
Yes.
Well, at that time, it was.
You got room for 7 children?
Well, it was strictly business at that time. Like, she was like, okay, my firm can help you get an attorney in Boise, because she lived, like I said, 3.5 hours away. But she actually said to me, she goes, you need to work this out with your wife.
I did.
And I did. I went through counseling and all this stuff and tried as much as I could, and it just wasn't going to happen. But I worked on it, and she basically said, you need to stick it out, because divorce is ugly. You don't need to. And so, like, I guess one of the
especially
disclaimers,
with all the children.
Yeah. And I told Jennie, kind of laughingly, but not, I told her, I said, when you start this podcast where you're interviewing couples and their second chances, I'm like, maybe at the beginning you say something like, now, please do not get a divorce. Try to work it out, those kind of things. But when you tried, and
and you've done all you can do,
there is a point where you have to go, okay,
it's not healthy.
So there's that piece of it too. But commitment is a big thing. And I take that seriously.
Well, the whole concept, I mean, the vows are universally for better or for worse. So you're not supposed to run when it gets worse. But what's interesting about it, though, I remember, because I went through a divorce as well. There's a lot of shame associated with it, and, that I was a failure and things like that. But the truth is I wasn't happy, and I did everything that I could to make it work. And like you said, even though it was still tough, I just remember these moments where I said, well, I guess this is the worse out of the better or worse. And I said, for better or worse, all I can tell you is this, you learn and you live, and you live and you learn. And, I'm a guy that has known that guy for quite some time. And for those of you that listen to the podcast, you'll have to try to catch the video as well, because when you just saw him explaining that period of his life, he went back to this stoic guy that I used to know. But when he starts talking about Jennie and his stories, and they go, they laugh, and they're like little children again. That so there's something to be said about that. And when I got divorced, a lot of people that we know started calling me and asking me, basically, should I get divorced? Right. So that's the disclaimer. We'll get into your podcast in a second. Is like, that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about the person that has tried everything and finds themselves at a crossroads where they're like, now I have nothing. I don't know where to go. There's hope. There's hope, So let's move into that base. I just remember the day that I heard the bad news and the good news from Bryan. Isn't that a weird thing? Like, he's a guy that I care a lot about. And I just remember it was tough what he had to go through. But then I heard about Jennie. So when did that happen? Like, when did you guys, because there's this aftermath of, like, you're supposed to have this grace period where you're supposed to talk about, like, the world's going to shame you for dating somebody else after you get divorced and all that. How did you guys navigate that time? How did it happen? Or is this something that we're not allowed to talk about?
No, we can talk about it. So basically, I got my attorney, and once I had filed and everything, I had a show down in Blackfoot, Idaho, which is near Pocatello, where she lives. And my son, Connor, was going down there with me. In fact, we had planned this before I even found out about any other stuff. So we had planned this trip. And I didn't know at the time, because Jennie wouldn't talk about her relationship. We didn't like talk about our relationships.
You were falling apart.
I was falling apart.
Basket case. So I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So it was all conversations were about in his, like, what should I do? And it's just like trying to get him stabilized, because he was a hot mess.
I was pretty much a hot mess. Anyway, I was. But I went down to this show with my son, and that's where I met Jennie. For the first time in 34 years.
1987 was the last time we saw each other.
We were at a dance, actually, right before my admission. And it was like, since I wasn't divorced yet, I was going through the process, and I didn't know, I found out that she was going through a divorce too, but she wouldn't say anything about it until after we got together.
Let me ask you a question about that. That's an important thing. Did you have a light of hope? Like, even though you couldn't even talk about it, and it was like forbidden because you weren't divorced yet or anything like that, did you have a moment where you're like, is the universe like forging for me right now?
Well, what's funny is after the first time I saw him, well, let's back up a second, because he was like, I want you to meet my son and his wife. And I'm like, well, that feels safe. So I called my son and my daughter-in-law. I'm like, can you guys go to the Southeastern Idaho Fair with me? I got to meet somebody I haven't seen for a long time. My son's like, sure, Mom, we'll go. Just as I'm leaving, my son says, we can't go, Mom. You're going to have to do this by yourself. We've got you on locator. If you need me, call me, So my son was like there to, like, I'll help you out, Mom, but I can't be there with you. So I was like, I got to do this by myself. So I'm going to the fair. And Debbie, my best friend, is calling me, Jennie, you're going to go to the fair. Do we need to come and chaperone you too? I'm like, there's nothing to chaperone.
And my best friend's calling me.
Yeah. And so they're both like putting, in our ears. But so after the fair, after I walked in and I saw him for the first time, he was sitting there, and it was like this bond that just, bam. I looked in his eyes, and all I could see was, I'm going to cry, 19-year-old Bryan. The last time that we saw each other was in Anchorage after a dance. He was walking away, getting into his car. I was driving off with my girlfriends, and I looked back and I watched him walk to his car. And in my mind, I thought, I'm not going to see him for a long time. I thought it would just be a few years while he was on his mission. I didn't know it was going to be over 3 decades. And at that moment, when I looked at him, I remembered that moment, and I'd forgotten about it for years. And I looked at him and I was like, it's him. It's the same guy. It's Bryan. It's those warm brown eyes. I didn't even notice the salt and pepper hair. it was just like yesterday. It was like time. It was like, yeah, a time warp. We went back in time, and right then it was instant connection. Zing.
Well, I have to say, from my side of so I was behind the booth, and I'm looking at her, and I felt like, because I wasn't divorced yet, so I'm like,
but you knew you were going to be.
I knew I was going to be divorced, but I wasn't divorced yet. In my mind, I'm like, is this the devil?
And it wasn't this like physical attraction thing. It was like, it was this connection of, wow, I know you.
It's something interesting, and I'm sure this is going to come out in the stories, and I want to talk a little bit about the podcast. It's kind of what we try to teach our kids. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and all these guys like her now and all that stuff. And it's a nightmare.
Yeah, he knows.
But at the same time, I'm trying to just tell her the world is tough, and you're gonna learn some lessons. You might meet the love of your life and have to wait 30 years before you can be with them. But I just said, when you know, you'll know, and when it happens, you can't stop it. And that's kind of the interesting thing about a second chance. Like we sometimes mess up the first chance because timing is off and we don't really know what we know. She just looked at Bryan and said, well, he kind of messed it up. But he's thinking like, well, you messed it up. I didn't know you were looking for me. Thank God you messed it up, because you got to wonder if it would have happened had you not.
Yeah.
You never know. That's what's interesting about the universe. Here we are today, and we've got this amazing new concept called second chance on love. So tell me a little bit about that, because obviously Mika and I have this crazy story as well, and I'm sure we'll share it with you guys one day on your show. But tell me what the purpose of it is. What are you hoping people get out of your podcast?
Well, Jennie's going to be doing the podcast.
I love this.
But we've talked about this, and it's really giving people hope that there is a chance, it's not over when you feel like it's over, because we both went through that, and we both went through this. So we know that there is something on the other end.
We know the difference.
We know the difference.
There's a difference. Yeah. When I was married, I would be walking on the beach with my first husband or whatever, and you'd see couples holding hands and so in love and looking at each other. It's like, oh, because that's not how we are. And so it's like, oh, well, and so, but when we reconnected, it's like, this is what it feels like. Yeah. I've never felt like this before. And I was trying to explain it to my sister, and she's like, you never felt like that? And I'm like, no. She was like, oh, that's so sad. I'm like, yeah, I'm like 51 and realizing it was always Bryan. And there were things in the back of my mind, little like sparks that the universe would just like a song would come on, like Crazy for You, Madonna, or some like Back to the Future, or just some 80s little thing that would come up. I'd be like, ping, Bryan. Oh no, he died. I don't want anything to do with them. And so that feeling of just settling and, you're just going through the day, just getting through the day. And you're just like, you just have that lump in your stomach. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, there's something that's not whole or right in this relationship. Previous relationships, it's just like, I'm just getting by. I'm just, giving everything I can. And this other person's not doing that for me. And needs aren't being met, and you're just giving. Bryan's a people pleaser and a giver. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a giver. And so it attracts those people that take from you and bleed your soul dry. And that's what it felt like. This relationship is like, it's like you fill my soul and I know you. And there's this strong bond of connection that I have never had with anyone. It's like, now we know the difference. And I didn't know this was what love could feel like. And then we were both like on the phone. I was on the phone with Debbie on that drive back home to my house in Pocatello. By the way, there was a shooting star that went across the sky. Stevie Nicks comes on. She's my vibe. And I'm like, this is a sign. And I call Debbie and I'm like, I just saw Bryan. Oh my gosh, Debbie, I don't know what to do. I'm like, and I start crying and I'm like, I hope he doesn't hurt me again. And he drives off and leave me and da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, she started laughing. She's like, oh my gosh, what did we do? And she's like, Jennie, Bryan's on the phone right now saying the same thing to Jerry on speakerphone. And so she's like, what did we do? I'm like, I don't know. But they have a similar story to ours as well. And so she's like, Jennie, I get it. She's like, I've always known that you and Bryan needed to talk about the past and get over it. She's like, there was always a connection with you two. Jerry and I know it. We saw it, we felt it. And every time she kind of tried to bring his name up in a conversation, for example, Jennie, come down to Vegas for this weekend and stay with me. Bryan and Jerry are staying together in their room, and I want you to come stay with me and you can hear Bryan speak. I'm like, no, I'm not going to see Bryan Drollinger, and I don't know what he's talking about, and I don't want anything to do with him. So next subject, Debbie. So I'd always try to shut it down. And then in that moment, she said to me, you were so defensive, like when we bring his name up, they're our best friends. So it's hard to not like associate each other with that. And so I was always avoiding him and avoiding, and so when I was talking with her, like all these feelings are real. It's just like happening. It's him. I even called my parents and told my parents, remember Bryan Drollinger from high school? Remember how I wrote him on his mission and then we couldn't find each other? And my mom's like, yes, I remember. And then I had a holy man from our church that told me when I was 16, he said, Jennie, when you meet the person you're supposed to be with, you might have already met him. And he winked at me. And he said, and when you meet him, you will know without a shadow of a doubt that that's who you're supposed to be with. And my mom and dad were standing there when this holy man told me that. And I remembered that. And I've forgotten about that for 30 years, that conversation. I was only 16. And then I remembered that as I was driving, when I saw Bryan, I'm like, bam, this is all the universe telling us this is our time to be together. So it's the universe just lined everything up. And I remember driving to work at my law firm, so unhappy. Where do you want me to be? God, like I'm just going to keep doing what I do. I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to help people. And then I don't know. I had actually just moved back to Idaho from Utah. And I basically moved back to Idaho to get divorced, essentially, is what I look back now. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And it was just to meet Bryan. Bryan would have never called me if I was working in Utah at the law firm I worked down there at, because he needed representation in the state of Idaho. And so it was just like all these little things, dot to dot, that makes the full picture as we look back now, that we didn't know, but I just was trusting the universe and God that I was going to be taken care of. And then this all started transpiring and happening. And it was like, woo woo.
So this is why I think Second Chance on Love is going to be a great thing, because it gives people hope,
inspiration,
inspires them. Like, okay,
I
got a guy right now, best friend of mine is going through divorce, went through a divorced. And he said, I just want to find a Jennie.
Yeah, everybody needs a Jennie. What's interesting about this idea of just considering a second chance on love, when you look at how important love is, and you know how it energizes the two of you. Like, I've never met Jennie prior to this amazing, rejoining of this, this fire starting again. But I would assume that Jennie was not like this a year before, so love is tough, right? It's vulnerable, it's scary. And, Jennie was afraid of getting hurt again and stuff, but love is so powerful that you can't deny it. You can't stop it. You can't be madly in love with someone and go away from them and not find them again. I don't believe in this whole, the one that got away thing. I don't think the one can get away. I don't think that's the way the universe works. So that's a message of hope for people as well. At the time when you're lost, you can't see the North Star. You've given up because you haven't, you've tried for 2 years or whatever. Meanwhile, you don't know it's going to take 30 years, but it's going to happen. What can people expect from this podcast? This is really exciting. Is it going to be all stories, or are we going to have any of the philosophical stuff and therapists and stuff like that? What can we expect?
Well, we do have amazing therapists he's offered to volunteer and help. And that's one thing we did decide early on before we even got super serious. We're like, what if we had a therapist we just talk to every once in a while? I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Before we even got married,
we have all the messy stuff in between us.
I see a therapist. I don't have a problem per se. I just think it's good to have somebody look under the hood, Yeah.
So exactly. And so what we're trying to do is create a community of people that can share their stories and this is very uncomfortable for me. I don't like sharing this is very vulnerable and I don't like putting stuff out there, but I feel like it's important to do because there's so many similar situations to others. And the most important thing is, like I said, creating a community of people that can come and share their stories and reconnect. And we're getting quite a few followers on Instagram right now, and already messages coming through of, oh my goodness, yeah, the one that got away type thing. And if it's meant to be, it'll circle back. If you love something, set it free. And if it was meant to be, it'll come back. And I think too, is one thing that I did a lot of work on for the 3 years before Bryan called me, that as I look back, there was like I don't know, like this magnetic thing that he was coming into my life, because things would happen that
manifestation.
It was. And I go to a spiritual healer. She's a medium. She is a spiritual advisor. She's not interdenominational. So she's just connected to the other side. And she helped me work on myself, because she said point blank to me, Jennie, you need to work on you. And then when you start working on you and know who you are and what your creator created you to be, everything starts to fall into line and fall into place. And it did. And so I've learned from that. And so that's what I want to share with other people too. And we're going to have like stories, and then,
and every
self-help.
week it'll be stories.
I love self-help. Like, you can always improve yourself. There's always something you can work on every day. Yeah. So we'll touch on those types of
that seems to be a very important part of the equation. I mean, like, I did not know my dream wife prior. I didn't meet her and lose her, and I found the woman that is perfect for me in a completely random way. But what I think a lot of the story is you'll always notice that people had to evolve. People had to have enough pain and suffering to drive them to do something radical, but also evolve into the person that makes the reunion or union right. And what's interesting, I'm sure you guys have talked about, man, I wish we had our whole lives together and all that stuff. But at the same time, I don't know if it would be as special. There was less magic around it and stuff. I mean, I think it's just perfect the way it unfolded.
Well, and we talked about this. We said, if we got together back then, and let's say the phone wasn't disconnected,
Bryan might have screwed it up.
I probably would have. We probably would have got a divorce ourselves. No, I don't know. Who knows? But we weren't ready, and it is about personal development and working on yourself. And when you have the person that's doing that with you, that makes all the difference.
Right. Well, this has been so much fun. It hits home to me, and this is a personal growth kind of self-development, sense-making podcast. But what we've just done is take something that affects everybody. Everybody's affected by love or lack of love and things like that. And I think that your podcast is kind of like a paying forward of your own experience.
Yes.
But through all of the stories that people will hear through the podcast, I think people will develop hope, right? It's like every time you hear, well, maybe I can, maybe me, because you guys didn't have a podcast like this for those 30 years. So you had lost hope, and you guys now know that the universe is watching and guiding and is in favor of things. So you have an advantage over everybody because of your experience. But for all those people that are lost out there and confused and maybe giving up and feeling like the universe is against them and they got a bad deck of cards and things like that, I think this podcast is going to be a big hit. I'm excited for it.
Well, thanks, JC. And it's exciting for us because we have a book coming out too, the end of the year. And then we also are right now in the middle of
America's Favorite Couple.
I have voted for that a couple times.
Yeah. So that's
thank you.
So we're in the top, I guess we're in the top 1% of the people, because there was 200,000 people that joined it.
Well, you guys have worked 30 years for that spot.
I guess so. It's like, okay, this is cool. So yeah, it would just help a little bit with.
Well, there's a spread in Variety magazine.
Yeah. There's a spread in Variety magazine, and so
we'll get the Make Sense generation and folks to get that link and hopefully drive that sucker home. But guys, thanks so much for sharing your story. It's so good to get to know Jennie a little bit more. I've only heard what Bryan has said about you, and it's nothing but good. He's like this little kid again, and watching you guys walk around holding hands. Even I never saw Bryan doing anything like that. He was just a committed dad that did everything right for his family. But it's so nice to see my good friend in love, like a little
Thanks,
silly
Jason.
boy now. So awesome. I love this episode, and I think that everybody will agree that a second chance on love makes sense. Remember, all of the links to the information and resources that we discussed on this episode, you'll be able to find in the notes of the podcast and any videos associated with it. But most importantly, remember this. If you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. So have a nice day. We'll see you next time.
Makes sense.